it is estimated that globally, losses arising from digital crime will be over $2 trillion by 2019, and India figures prominently among those nations who are amongst the worst affected. For Indian corporate entities, the losses recorded from digital theft were over $4 billion based on recent estimates. With a year-on-year increase of 20% in cyber criminal cases, the country faces a growing threat from digital con artists, hackers, malware developers, amongst others. An estimated 113 million Indians lost about 16,500 rupees on an average to cybercrime in 2015 as per one study. Domestic companies have reportedly also faced reputational losses, with one survey pointing out that 49% of affected firms having to invest in improving brand perceptions, while an improved knowledge of the cybersecurity threats exists. Implementing basic data protection protocols and knowing how to effectively respond to a breach remains a concern.
Hello and welcome to another episode of India Risk Report. India has one of the largest users of IT in the world, and Indian companies continue to be extremely vulnerable to cyber attacks. In this episode, we are going to look at the various challenges of cybersecurity that we as a nation face, both at the national level, the challenges that companies and corporates must remain alert to, and why individuals, especially those who work for companies and multinationals, and their carelessness could have devastating effect on the future of their companies. Hi, Jitin. You obviously have spent a lot of time on cybersecurity issues, particularly with reference to South Asian countries and India and its neighborhood. And India, as you were mentioning when we got to know each other a bit, that India is facing multiple threats, primarily from two of our major adversaries, which is China and Pakistan. And China has a full division of people, military division of people, hacking away, attacking sites. And I remember some years ago, the Home Secretary of India going on record to say that sites in the various government offices are regularly attacked by Chinese attackers. Pakistan's also obviously picking up some of the tricks in the trade. So what is the big picture and what is the kind of threat we face, both at official government level and at the level of the industry?
I think in my opinion, today the cybersecurity threat is becoming the biggest national security threat in this country. What has happened in last 5-6 years is that, we have grown phenomenally in IT sector. We have had, we are called one of the biggest software superpowers in the world. But the story appears is like that we have won the world, but we are defeated at home. While India has massively gone for digital India campaigns, we have absolutely not focused on digital security. And if you look at the incidents of last 2 years, we have had at least 15 to 16 major incidents of espionage and cyber attacks, where secrets of DRDO have been stolen, the massive rackets for espionage run by ISI using smartphones and laptops have been busted. But there is also another picture which shows that the Indian cyber crimes are rising at 350% per year. But what is shocking here in this that this entire arena of cyber crimes and cyber espionage, we have failed to file even a single FIR for any cyber attack or cyber espionage case. So that is where my biggest worry is that while we are not even able to detect attacks, and in some cases where we are able to detect, we are not proceeding in terms of investigation and finally getting into the bottom of it, which is not giving a clear picture to the country. So what is today happening is that we are left completely defenseless. Both our neighbors are having a free run in our country because they know that nothing will happen in terms of investigation. And the most sensitive facilities in this country are simply so vulnerable that it is an easy cake for.
I'd like to take up 2 points that you have made. One is the fact that filing of FIR. Now, one of the biggest advantage for a cyber attacker is that it is very difficult to track them down from where the cyber attacks came from. So therefore, if you go purely by the legal dimension, where they'll say, who was the attacker, where did it come from? and even big companies and corporates are not able to really pinpoint. I mean, further to the data, you said that 350% of cybercrime cases in India that have been recorded as an increment from 2001 to 2014. 72% of companies in the country fell prey to online attacks. And disturbingly, 54% indicated that spend on cyber defenses is less than 5% of the IT spend. Yeah. Now, what is your message to all of them?
Now, you have to look that, if you pick up the top 100 hacks of last 2 years, or even in India or across the globe, you will find every single entity which came under attack or whose secrets were stolen, they were all audited by one of the greatest cybersecurity auditors. And they were all hacked by an individual. So one you have to see is that while we actually go on to have the cybersecurity audits, we must realize that we should not do it for the purpose of due diligence and just getting a certificate. We have to actually ensure that we are doing a proper cybersecurity defenses, putting a system in place. And second, look at India. IRCTC, one of the South Asia's biggest commercial portal database is stolen. You are facing one of the biggest bank frauds in the history of India. If you look in the neighborhood, billions of dollars have been stolen from the central banks. There is absolutely no trace of it. So while you are right that the attribution is a problem in cyber crimes, it's very difficult to trace the attack or the attackers. But at times when you are able to have some sort of evidence and attacks, then FIR helps in two purposes. A, it does help in exposing a state which is at times supporting these non-state actors which are involved in terrorism, terror financing, especially in our neighborhood like Pakistan. So if you have got evidence, it's good to put it on record and name and shame them in public, because a state is not supposed to carry out these activities in the name of non-state actors. Second, it also acts as a incident reporting mechanism. So for example, if last year we busted a racket where a mobile application called SmeshApp was used to compromise 3,500 defense personnel's mobile. So had an FIR been lodged or some incident would have been reported in public, it would have helped others not to install such an app and then fall prey to it.
Talking therefore.
Yeah, so reporting the incident and putting in public domain it also works as an awareness mechanism.
That's my next question. Actually, you interestingly led on to that. It is individuals. Indians lead their global counterparts in willingly sharing personal information like credit card numbers. 31% Indians apparently have often give away data without actually worrying about. More than 1 out of 3 Indians, that is 36%, shared their personal data even when they realized that this will make them vulnerable. Yeah. And on the other hand, you see in a separate international survey, 30% of India, the highest amongst 14 countries surveyed globally, had given access or shared information using their Wi-Fi or personal information like credit card details just by passing on to others, and they were eventually stolen.
So Maroof, look, we are one of the biggest telecom and internet economies in the world. And in last 2 years with this new government focusing on digital India, there is so much of digitization of economy, especially in rural area taking place, and the cost of smartphone coming down. You are seeing that there is a new generation which is logging on internet for the first time in their lives. And there is absolutely no digital literacy. They don't know what is a fake banking app, what is a phishing page, what to share, what not to share, what can be the consequences of sharing. Children falling prey to different scams and blackmails. So what is happening is that we are not a very digitally literate society. There are rich people who are having a very expensive smartphone. They do not know the consequences of sharing data or things on Facebook. So in my opinion, this is one of the things I think we as a society have to focus on awareness and literacy to prevent all this. I mean, that's one of the challenges as a size of population and the speedy implementation of this digitization schemes we are facing. It has to go hand in hand. Modernization and literacy has to go together.
Well, forget about people who are first-time users, but even people who are otherwise considered literate and smart, and corporate users are very happily passing on personal and professional information which is going to compromise them, their companies, and business interests. So more of that as we go along in the program, but quite clearly, you have given us the big picture. Alarm bells should be sounded. I just hope those who watch this program are going to learn and tighten their belts and get ready for the challenge that Digital India poses to both industry and individuals. Thank you very much for being with us. On the other side of this episode, we'll be back with another expert. Well, Mr. Chatterjee, welcome to the show, and you obviously have a lot of experience in a number of areas related with technology and the legal dimensions to this. And there is a comment that comes up, in a way, it's a very sweeping comment, but it is basically that in India, security compliance has never been a proactive phenomena. And therefore, we have certain legal initiatives in place, but again, almost all the security issues pertaining to mobility and mobile platforms remain untouched by the IT Act. That's the first. And the second is many companies have a lax policy towards bring your own data, including the use of unsecured pen drives, optical discs, etc. So therefore, what's your take on this? I mean, the whole approach to legality, and that's your specialty.
I think the whole gap, and this is a generic problem in a country like India where legislation never keeps pace with reality, and technology and particularly cyber side of life has grown far and wide. Mobility is a bigger problem because today internet penetrates to small rural segments of the country, and I think the lawmaking and the law enforcement agencies both are at dark as to what really can happen because of that. And this is one major concern. The legislative attempts are currently limited to, I would say, getting the Evidence Act, the IT Act and the Indian Penal Code tied together.
Right.
The industry that has really grown in terms of what we see, the IT, ITES sector, has a lot of balancing to do for themselves. They serve markets which are very diverse, and therefore they don't know where to balance in terms of the legislation.
Okay, now this is where I come in because, I'm privy to some of your thoughts, right, in which it says that the framework to link essentially crimes as defined by the Indian Penal Code and the need for following the Evidence Protection Against the Evidence Act are now linked to the IT Act. Okay. But again, there is a view I think you also hold that we are still not able to decide the global standards to meet. So we have acts, but they are not probably the best practices that are followed in the world. We're trying to distill it out and make it work. So how, it's a classic challenge that we have in every phase of life in India. How do you make the global best practices applicable and functional in India?
But then the US and the EU norms are not at par, right? So when we have clients who we are servicing in the EU for a certain segment of clients, essentially everyone is resorting to the contractual obligations that they follow. Now the question is, I have been privy, and this is donkeys of years ago, where we tried to bring in Data Protection Act, we tried to get the IT Act far more robust than what it is today. The real challenge, ironically, was the industry. They were not ready to change it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Because they did not know which bird would get hit, and therefore business would trickle down and not come to them, and they are feeling safe. So whether it's an ASCOM or anybody else, they can't lobby the industry together to form a single opinion saying, should we go by the US safe harbor? Should we go by the EU regulation? Shall we remain bound with contracts? And I think the consensus is, let's remain bound with contracts and we will see what comes next.
Well, there's also a problem that when the government created the whole sorts of terms of engagement for cybersecurity and the IT usage within the country, they did not take the private industry completely into confidence. So it was a governmental vision of what should be cybersecurity and IT security. And therefore, the industry was given a skip. Now, is that true?
I wouldn't totally agree. I think the industry was engaged, and my personal viewpoint remains that the industry still was divided.
Okay, the Telecom Regulatory Authority of India publicly supporting net neutrality. On the other hand, you have certain broadband service providers who offer the content of their choice, which is movies, television shows, journals, newspapers, for free to consumer use, and however, how are companies likely to view such a feature, and does it impact overall on the operational risk?
I would agree, but then again, this is again my personal view that this is market driven. I mean, if I have the ability to buy content and I am willing to pay the cost of acquiring a certain amount of the customer hold inside the market, then I am willing to offer it at my terms. I mean, currently, if we look at it from another perspective, we look at, say, a film piracy issue. Cybersecurity laws are not extraterritorial. So if a pirate runs the site out of India, then what do I do?
Okay. Indian cyber governance landscape is expanding. This is a field which keeps expanding. At the same time, this quickly makes every law that you create archaic in no time. So how does legal issues keep pace with the expanding template of cyber activity?
Can I share an anecdote on this?
Yeah,
sure. So historically we studied in law school about a certain Justice Hidayatullah, and it is about progression of technology, and therefore I quoted. In a contract, there was a question where when does the contract get concluded, and as modern communication improved, instead of a post going through a letterbox and therefore contract getting concluded, at that point of time people would communicate on the phone. The Supreme Court at that stage decided because the phone was a new paradigm, therefore the law should change. So when the aircraft flew over my head and I was listening and I couldn't hear, the contract didn't stand concluded, though when I posted into the letterbox, it changed. Justice Hidayatullah was a young judge. He was the minority view. I still hold that minority view. I don't think so. The law needs to be interpreted every time when you change something.
Right.
You need to work with because the principles remain the same. Technology may change, but the principle doesn't.
Very good point. I think at that we need to wrap up because we are short of time, but thank you very much for being with us, and quite clearly this is part of our learning exercise on cybersecurity and the legal dimension. And after a break, we'll be talking to yet another expert in this episode. Anand, you have considerable experience in a whole lot of IT-related issues, particularly in the area of cybersecurity. And one of the biggest problems or one of the biggest challenges that is there for IT-related companies is that no method being adopted by them is fail-safe. Biometrics, double authentication, even antivirus related activities all have areas which could lead to breaching by an aggressive element trying to get in. So what would be a medium point that you would suggest for companies to adopt to deal with cyber threats?
Yeah, one of the things that we have seen as a gap in the industry is companies tend to copy from the international clients, and they don't do their own risk assessment, and they don't try to customize it to what their needs and capabilities are. And many a times when they do these kind of work, it will not be holistic. It will all be done in very, very patchy manner. Just because the client says I need biometric, they'll go install a biometric without understanding the ramifications. But what is need of the hour is some kind of an integration to see the data that is coming out of all these devices and technology, and drawing a conclusion as to what exactly is happening in the unknown world of cyber.
Well, interestingly, the word integration is itself a problem area, as you would know, because as devices become more and more interconnected and corporate security and data that is shared by people, I have information here that with a whole lot of sharing of data or inadvertently passing off of data, we are obviously creating more situations which are going to create more threats. So what's the way out?
The way out is we have to look at the people, process and technology. Right? Many a times some of these breaches happen because of the lack of awareness on the people side, while the technology could still do its work, people, sharing data on pen drives or sharing data on their, social media creates a lot of security breach. So people awareness is one of the crucial aspects that we have seen in the corporate as lacking.
And there is an estimate that between 5 to 10 billion devices could be connected to the internet sooner than later. By 2020, there could be 50 billion. So therefore, obviously, Big Brother can watch the smaller brothers and sisters operating their system. So there is that one issue of private security as against corporate security. The other issue that I find that is equally a problem area is that there are a lot of companies and their basic devices that are vulnerable, but there is a fear of sharing this information with others, that their experience has made them vulnerable for fear that it will show the company in poor light. So how do you overcome that?
See, the thing is, unless we don't learn from others' mistake, we will never be able to improve. And there is no time or there is no practical approach in the world that I will experience every single scenario and try to fix it.
Yeah.
So what is important is for companies to, if not share the details, at least discuss it in a closed forum, and come out
amongst with the security heads.
Security heads.
Yeah. So how do discuss and then do what?
So basically look at what best options are available. So maybe there needs to be a technology change, there needs to be a process change. Somebody had a similar type of issue and they came out with a solution, maybe implement that proactively. Many a time the cybersecurity threats take longer time to detect. Forget about prevention. It takes a lot of time to detect. So if we can reduce the detection time, I think companies will be more secure.
Okay, now let me get on to personal security. Now, more and more people are resorting to internet banking, mobile cash for transaction, use of various other paying software and transaction software, which has obviously increased the possibility of cyber threats and attacks onto your bank account. In 2016, Bengaluru police arrested members of a gang, including bank employees, for hacking into wallets operated by 2 major banks in India. And I think more of them are doing it, but they haven't yet been arrested. So how does an individual draw a balance between how much to go the e-way and how much to protect his assets? Because often when you find out, it's a bit late.
That's correct. So we can't pull back from the way forward of digitalization of the world. What we need to do is we need to start inculcating some kind of an awareness. So for example, if we teach the kids saying don't touch the electric wire, which will give you a shock or something like that, where we start grooming people at a very young age, we should start talking about grooming people at a very young age on cyber risk. And that's the only way, and it needs a generation and a cultural change to achieve what we want to achieve.
Well, talking of cyber risk, so therefore, is cyber insurance a way forward? Because it's been suggested the cyber insurance market could notch up to $7.5 billion in annual sales by 2020. So are the insurance companies really looking at this possibility?
Well, in the true sense of it, it might not solve the problem, because insurance companies will come with their own regulatory requirements of implementing some controls, which will outpass some of the risks that we already carry. So it's again left to the companies to do their risk appetite and risk management to come up with whether they need to secure the cyber insurance or they can install a technology and have a better in-house mechanism that prevents that kind of a requirement.
So quite clearly, cyber threats are there both for the industry and for individuals. And the way out is to actually establish the best practices that companies and individuals can adopt to ensure that you don't become more vulnerable than you already are. Any other parting shots?
No, I think it's more of organizations, having this discussion at all levels. Today, it is more done at a, cybersecurity professional level. Management looks at the money. So I think somewhere that it's no more a vertical as it was a few years back. Now it's become a horizontal. So everybody in the organization would talk the same language.
Well, thank you for your participation. And with that, we come to an end of this episode. We'll be back next week with another episode. Thank you for watching. Until then, goodbye.